China just broke ranks with NASA and issued an official warning about March 8th. And what they revealed about this mysterious object has completely shattered the narrative NASA's been feeding us for months. This wasn't a diplomatic statement or scientific debate. China's space program just publicly declared that Atlas is exhibiting capabilities NASA keeps denying exist. They released tracking data showing impossible maneuvers. They shared observations of technology that shouldn't be there, and they warned the world to prepare for something NASA insists won't happen. But here's what makes this absolutely explosive. Within hours, Russia backed China's warning, then India, then Japan. One by one, space agencies across the globe started supporting China's assessment, while NASA maintains complete radio silence. Either the entire international space community is participating in mass delusion about Atlas's capabilities or NASA has been lying to us. And based on what China just revealed, it's becoming very clear which scenario is true. Before we expose what China discovered that NASA won't acknowledge, hit that subscribe button and drop a like because what you're about to learn about Atlas changes everything. The geopolitical space race just revealed something both superpowers have been tracking the difference. China decided the world deserves to know. NASA decided we should stay in the dark. Let's get straight to what China observed about Atlas because their findings are absolutely mind-blowing and completely contradict everything NASA has told us. China's Deep Space Tracking Network captured Atlas performing maneuvers that should be physically impossible for a natural object. Over a 48-hour observation period, Atlas decelerated by 5,000 miles per hour, held a stable position in space for 6 hours, then accelerated back to its original velocity. Think about what that means. Comets don't hit the brakes. Asteroids don't pause mid-flight. Natural space objects follow predictable paths determined by gravity and momentum. Atlas is actively controlling its movement like a spacecraft navigating through our solar system. A propulsion expert analyzing China's data made it simple. What they documented is powered flight. No question about it. The acceleration profiles, the velocity changes, the ability to maintain station keeping, all of this requires engines. Advanced engines using technology we can barely comprehend. But the propulsion capabilities are just the beginning. China's radio telescope arrays detected something even more extraordinary about Atlas. It's broadcasting complex signals that show unmistakable signs of intelligent design. The transmissions aren't random electromagnetic noise. They're structured, organized, and using modulation techniques that require sophisticated technology. China detected frequency hopping where signals rapidly switch between different frequencies to avoid interference or detection. That's a military communication technique. Natural phenomena don't do that. The signals also contain what appears to be error correction codes, mathematical structures designed to ensure data integrity when transmitting through noisy space. Again, that's advanced technology, not natural radio emissions. One radio astronomer who reviewed China's signal analysis described it as shocking. These transmissions show engineering principles. Someone or something designed a communication system, built it, and is actively using it. Atlas isn't just an object drifting through space. It's a platform transmitting information with clear purpose. China's space-based telescopes also captured high-resolution images of Atlas that reveal surface features. NASA's images somehow never showed clearly. The Chinese imagery shows geometric patterns on Atlas's surface. Straight lines, right angles, symmetrical arrangements that look strikingly artificial. Natural space objects are chaotic. Asteroids and comets have irregular random surface features formed by collisions, thermal stress, and gravitational forces. Atlas shows organized structures that suggest deliberate construction. Now, here's where things get really interesting and really suspicious. NASA has been observing Atlas with equipment just as sophisticated as China's. So, why are their conclusions so dramatically different? For months, NASA has characterized Atlas as an unusual but ultimately natural interstellar object. Yes, it has some strange properties, they admit, but nothing that definitively proves artificial origin. Just an interesting comet with some peculiar features worth studying. But China's data shows propulsion, structured communications, and geometric surface features. These aren't subtle anomalies that could be interpreted different ways. These are clear signatures of technology. Either China's equipment is severely malfunctioning in very specific ways, or NASA has been selectively releasing data that downplays Atlas's true nature. Multiple sources suggest NASA detected the same propulsion signatures China observed, but chose not to make them public. Internal communications allegedly describe trajectory anomalies requiring further analysis before public disclosure, which is bureaucratic language for, "We found something alarming that we're not ready to share." A former NASA scientist speaking anonymously described the AWI's approach. There's enormous pressure to avoid making extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence. But sometimes that caution becomes denial. When you see propulsion signatures, but you're terrified of saying, "This might be alien technology," you end up downplaying obvious evidence to avoid controversy. NASA's public statements about Atlas have been carefully worded to technically avoid lying while misleading the public about what they've actually observed. They say things like, "Currently, no evidence of artificial propulsion," when what they mean is we haven't officially classified the anomalies as propulsion, even though that's clearly what they look like. The electromagnetic emissions are another example. NASA acknowledges detecting unusual radio signatures from Atlas, but characterizes them as poorly understood natural phenomena. Meanwhile, China's analysis shows clear communication protocols. NASA isn't saying China is wrong. They're just not confirming it publicly. An aerospace analyst described the discrepancy. NASA and China are looking at the same object with comparable technology. They're seeing the same data, but NASA is interpreting it through the most conservative possible lens because they're terrified of the implications. China apparently decided the truth matters more than avoiding panic. The image discrepancy is particularly damning. NASA has released numerous photos of Atlas, but they're always at resolutions or angles that make surface details unclear. China's images taken with similar equipment show those geometric patterns clearly. Either NASA's imaging team is remarkably incompetent or they're deliberately releasing images that hide Atlas's artificial features. Let's focus on what Atlas itself has been doing because its behavior tells us far more than any government statement or press release ever could. The propulsion maneuvers China documented aren't random. Atlas has been making systematic course corrections that suggest deliberate navigation towards specific objectives. It's not just drifting through the solar system. It's visiting locations with apparent purpose. Atlas performed detailed surveys of Mars, deploying objects to the surface and conducting intensive scans of specific regions. That's reconnaissance behavior. It methodically mapped areas of scientific or strategic interest, gathered data, and moved on. Now, Atlas is maneuvering toward Earth using the same systematic approach. It's not on a simple flyby trajectory. It's adjusting course repeatedly, apparently fine-tuning its approach to achieve optimal positioning relative to our planet. An orbital mechanics specialist explained what the trajectory shows. Atlas is navigating like a spacecraft approaching a destination. It's making the kinds of course corrections you'd make if you wanted to arrive at specific coordinates at a specific time. This isn't ballistic flight. This is piloted navigation. The electromagnetic transmissions have also evolved throughout Atlas's journey through our solar system. Early transmissions were simple, almost like test broadcasts to verify systems were functioning. As Atlas approached inner solar system objects, the transmissions became more complex and targeted. When Atlas was near Mars, transmission intensity increased dramatically and appeared directed toward the Martian surface, possibly communicating with the objects it deployed there. Now, as Atlas approaches Earth, transmissions are intensifying again and seem directed toward our planet. A communications specialist analyzing the signal patterns described them as progressive. Early signals were like testing. Is this working? Current transmissions are structured, purposeful, and appear designed to convey specific information. Whatever Atlas is, it's trying to communicate and getting more sophisticated in its attempts. Atlas has also demonstrated an ability to respond to its environment. When it passed through a region of space with higher than normal micrometeorite density, it adjusted its orientation to minimize impact risk on critical surfaces. That's active threat response, not passive drifting. When Jupiter's gravity began affecting Atlas's trajectory, it compensated with thrust adjustments that maintained its intended course. Natural objects don't compensate for gravitational perturbations. They just get pulled along. Atlas actively counters forces that would alter its path. Perhaps most tellingly, ATL appears to be studying us as much as we're studying it. Its positioning during Mars observation provided optimal lines of sight to Earth. Its current trajectory will bring it close enough to Earth for detailed observation while remaining outside easy reach of our defensive capabilities. That positioning is tactically smart. Close enough to gather intelligence, far enough to maintain safety margins. It's exactly how you'd approach an unknown planet if you wanted to study it without immediate risk of confrontation. China's warning triggered a cascade of responses from space agencies worldwide. And the pattern of those responses reveals that China isn't alone in what they've observed about Atlas. Russia's space agency released a statement within hours of China's announcement. Recent observations of Object 3I by Russian space surveillance networks confirm sophisticated maneuvering capabilities and structured electromagnetic emissions. We support international coordination for unprecedented contact protocols. That's remarkably similar language to China's warning. Russia is confirming they've seen the same propulsion and communications that China described. Two major space powers with independent tracking capabilities are now on record saying Atlas is artificial. India's space program followed with their own statement acknowledging anomalous properties in Atlas that suggest advanced technological origins. Japan's space agency noted trajectory characteristics inconsistent with natural phenomena. The European Space Agency convened emergency meetings with member nations to discuss unprecedented scenarios. One by one, international space agencies are breaking away from NASA's conservative narrative and acknowledging what they're actually seeing. ATLAS behaves like artificial technology, not a natural object. But notice who isn't saying anything. NASA and its closest allies. The United States Space Agency maintains complete silence. So does the UK Space Agency. Canada's space program has made no statement. The Anglo-American space establishment is conspicuously quiet while the rest of the world raises alarms. A geopolitical analyst described the divide. This is shaping up as the most significant international science crisis in history. One bloc of nations is warning about artificial interstellar technology approaching Earth. Another bloc is saying nothing, hoping the situation resolves without public panic. That divide reveals deep disagreement about transparency versus control. Behind closed doors, diplomatic tensions are escalating. Countries that have acknowledged Atlas's artificial nature are demanding coordinated international response. Nations staying silent are being accused of withholding critical information that affects all of humanity. The United Nations scheduled emergency sessions of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. Multiple nations demanded that the U.S. share all Atlas tracking data and explain why NASA's assessment differs so dramatically from international observations. A UN diplomatic source described the mood. There's real anger. Nations feel betrayed that the U.S. has been downplaying Atlas's significance while they've been observing the same alarming phenomena China described. The trust that enables international space cooperation is being severely damaged. NASA's refusal to respond to China's warning or acknowledge the international consensus about Atlas's artificial nature reveals a lot about their decision-making process. And none of it reflects well on the AY's commitment to transparency. One factor is institutional inertia. NASA has spent months characterizing Atlas as natural, if unusual. Reversing that position now would require admitting they were wrong or worse, that they've been deliberately misleading the public. Government agencies hate admitting error, especially on issues this significant. There's also genuine fear of public reaction. NASA's leadership apparently believes that confirming Atlas is artificial technology would trigger panic, economic disruption, religious upheaval, and social chaos. Whether that fear is justified or patronizing, it drives their information control strategy. A former NASA administrator explained the thinking. The assumption is that the public can't handle existential paradigm shifts. If we confirm alien technology is approaching Earth, market crashes, religions splinter, people stop going to work because what's the point anymore? Leadership sees it as their responsibility to prevent that chaos by controlling information flow. But that paternalistic approach has consequences. By staying silent while other nations warn about Atlas, NASA is forfeiting American leadership on the most important issue in human history. Other nations are now setting the narrative. While NASA appears either incompetent or dishonest, there are also military and intelligence considerations. If Atlas represents advanced technology, studying it could provide massive strategic advantages. The nation that understands Atlas's propulsion systems, communication protocols, or construction methods first gains potentially civilization-altering technological leaps. NASA's silence might be coordinated with military space programs that want time to analyze Atlas without international interference. If the U.S. can crack Atlas's technology before sharing it globally, that could extend American technological dominance for generations. A defense analyst described the strategic calculation. From a national security perspective, Atlas is the ultimate intelligence goldmine. You don't share intelligence about game-changing technology with potential adversaries until you've exploited it yourself. NASA's silence might be serving military interests rather than scientific ones. But the most cynical interpretation is simply that NASA doesn't know how to walk back months of minimizing Atlas's significance without destroying their credibility. They've dug themselves into a narrative hole where admitting the truth means admitting they misled the public, possibly deliberately, about the most important discovery in history. Let's set aside the geopolitical drama and focus on what Atlas itself is actually doing right now, because its current behavior suggests we're running out of time for debates about disclosure strategies. Based on tracking data from multiple international sources, Atlas is currently positioned approximately 140 million miles from Earth and closing. This trajectory isn't a simple approach curve. It's a carefully calculated path that's bringing it into Earth's orbital neighborhood at what appears to be a deliberately chosen arrival time. Atlas continues making periodic thrust adjustments, fine-tuning its approach. Each maneuver is small but precise, suggesting whatever controls the object has clear objectives and is methodically achieving them. The electromagnetic transmissions have intensified dramatically over the past 2 weeks. What started as occasional broadcasts are now nearly continuous emissions across multiple frequency bands. Whatever Atlas wants to communicate, it's trying harder to get the message across. A signals intelligence specialist analyzing the transmissions described their evolution. Early signals were exploratory, like testing different frequencies to see what works. Current transmissions are focused, powerful, and appear directed specifically toward Earth. It's like watching someone who's been trying to get your attention from across a crowded room finally standing up and waving directly at you. Some transmissions now include what appear to be visual data patterns that, when decoded, might represent images or diagrams. Multiple research teams are working independently to decode these transmissions, and preliminary results suggest Atlas is sending information about itself. Specifications, capabilities, possibly even intentions. One decoded segment appears to show a star map, possibly indicating Atlas's point of origin. Another shows what might be molecular diagrams, either describing Atlas's composition or showing the chemistry of life as it understands it. A third shows what could be a schematic of Atlas itself, revealing internal structures we haven't been able to observe directly. But perhaps most significant are the countdown sequences embedded in recent transmissions. Multiple analysis teams have identified numerical patterns that decrease over time, suggesting Atlas is marking time until something specific occurs. Current estimates suggest the countdown reaches 0 in approximately 4 to 6 weeks. What happens at 0? Nobody knows. Arrival at Earth's orbital distance, deployment of additional objects, initiation of direct communication attempts, activation of capabilities not yet demonstrated. The countdown is clear. This meaning is not. Atlas has also begun releasing smaller objects, dozens of them, over the past week. These objects spread out from Atlas in systematic patterns, taking up positions that create a grid-like network extending for millions of miles around the main object. These could be communication relays building a network to transmit data across larger distances. They could be sensor platforms gathering environmental data from multiple locations. Or they could be defensive systems positioning themselves to protect Atlas if we attempt hostile action. Whatever their purpose, Atlas is actively deploying assets in preparation for something. That level of activity suggests imminent plans, not distant intentions. Current trajectory models from international tracking networks all converge on a similar timeline. Atlas will reach its closest approach to Earth in 4 to 6 weeks. And closest approach might be a misleading term because the data suggests Atlas isn't planning a flyby. The positioning Atlas appears to be achieving would place it approximately 3 to 4 million miles from Earth, close enough for detailed observation and potential communication, but far enough to remain outside effective range of any defensive measures we could take. That's not an accident. That distance is strategically chosen. It's close enough to interact with Earth if desired, far enough to maintain safety from anything we might try. It's the approach distance an advanced intelligence would choose if they wanted to study us while minimizing risk. An aerospace strategist described the tactical positioning. If you were approaching a planet with unknown capabilities and potentially hostile inhabitants, you'd want to be close enough to accomplish your objectives, but far enough that their weapons can't easily reach you. Atlas is positioning itself exactly where our threat capability drops off significantly. At that distance, Atlas could deploy smaller objects toward Earth that would reach our atmosphere in days. It could conduct intensive scans of our surface, mapping everything in extraordinary detail. It could attempt direct communication with our governments, our militaries, or even broadcast messages directly to our global population. We, on the other hand, would have extremely limited capability to affect Atlas. Our fastest spacecraft would take weeks to reach it. Our most powerful weapons would struggle to achieve effective targeting at that range. If Atlas's intentions are hostile, that positioning gives us very few good options. But hostility might not be Atlas's intention. That same positioning would be perfect for peaceful first contact. Close enough to demonstrate presence and capability, far enough to avoid seeming threatening. It's a diplomatic distance showing power while inviting dialogue. The countdown in Atlas's transmissions appears to coincide with arrival at that optimal distance. Whatever Atlas has been planning throughout its journey through our solar system, whatever it's been preparing for and building toward, it will apparently occur when that countdown reaches 0. China's warning takes on new significance in this context. They're telling the world, prepare for something significant happening in 4 to 6 weeks. Whether that's first contact, observation, or something else entirely, Atlas is approaching a critical moment. And NASA's silence becomes even more inexcusable. If China is right, and the evidence strongly suggests they are, we have mere weeks before the most important event in human history, and NASA is still hoping we don't notice. So here's where we are. Atlas is approaching Earth with demonstrated artificial capabilities. China and multiple international space agencies have warned the world to prepare. NASA remains silent, and we have roughly a month before Atlas reaches its destination. The question isn't whether Atlas is artificial anymore. The evidence is overwhelming. The question is what happens when it arrives and whether we're ready for it. We should be preparing communication strategies. What do we want to say if Atlas attempts direct contact? How do we respond to an intelligence vastly more advanced than our own? Who speaks for humanity, and what message do we want to convey? We should be coordinating international response. This isn't an American issue or a Chinese issue. This is a human species issue. Whatever happens when Atlas arrives, it affects everyone on Earth equally. We need unified approaches, not competing national agendas. We should be honest with the global population. People deserve to know what's approaching and what we understand about it. The alternative is billions of humans being surprised by first contact because their governments decided they couldn't handle advanced warning. China decided transparency matters. NASA decided secrecy is safer. In 4 to 6 weeks, we'll discover which approach was correct. But that discovery will happen whether NASA acknowledges reality or not. Atlas is coming. The countdown continues. China warned us. NASA stays silent. And humanity is about to face something we're desperately unprepared for. Not because we lacked warning, but because those who should have prepared us chose not to. What do you think NASA's silence really means? Are they protecting us or protecting themselves? And what do you think Atlas will do when that countdown reaches 0? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure you're subscribed, because in 4 to 6 weeks, we'll all find out together whether China's warning was vindicated or overblown.